You guys ready? Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. I want to first acknowledge my executive team members who are in attendance: Chief Deputy Jan Bledsoe, Deputy of Major Crimes Kurt Bjorklund, Assistant State's Attorney Liz Stock, and Rita Wistoff-Ito, as well as the Director of our Management Information Systems, Darren O'Brien, who I will turn to very shortly. I think we can all agree that this year has gotten off to a rather tragic start with almost 70 homicides. I'm outraged and saddened at this senseless violence and send my prayers and condolences to those who have suffered the loss of their loved ones. Please know that my office remains committed to prosecuting those who are responsible for perpetuating violence in the streets of Baltimore, which is why I first applaud the outstanding collaboration between my prosecutors and the Baltimore Police Department in obtaining a number of recent convictions despite the intermittent operation of the courts over the past 2 years. Because of this collaboration, just this past month, my prosecutors secured several sentences for violent individuals that send a clear message that we will never give up in our fight for justice on behalf of the citizens of Baltimore City. In another victory, Trevor McDowell was sentenced to life in prison, to spend all but 40 years with 5 years probation, along with his other conditions such as anger management and mental health follow-ups that had been stipulated by the court for the fatal stabbing of Alex Bland and the fatal beating of Joyce Anderson. Assistant State's Attorney Rita Wistoff-Ito prosecuted this case. McDowell was found naked and covered in blood outside the Broadway East residence where he committed the murders. In a separate case, Leon Lomax pled guilty to the fatal shooting of Tamar Brown in the Park Heights neighborhood. Mr. Lomax shot Mr. Brown twice in the back in 2015 and was paralyzed from the waist down. Brown later died in 2019 due to complications from that original shooting. Assistant State's Attorney Chandrea Hanna prosecuted that case. Many of you can also recall the dreadful killing of Fabian Mendez in Highland last year. Mr. Mendez was carjacked and then run over and dragged several blocks to his death in a crime that shocked the city. Last week, 2 juveniles were pled guilty to the murder and were sentenced to life in prison to spend all but 30 years with 5 years probation. Assistant State's Attorney Elizabeth Stock prosecuted that case. Earlier this month, Keith Smith was sentenced to life plus 3 years in prison for the fatal stabbing of his wife, Jacqueline Smith. Many of you can remember this case because he created an elaborate cover-up plan to cowardly blame panhandlers in Baltimore City for the horrific stabbing of his wife. Assistant State's Attorney Chandrea Hanna prosecuted that case. Finally, earlier this month, Lawrence Banks was sentenced to 41 years in prison for the second-degree murder of his daughter, Dominique Foster. After killing his daughter, Banks dismembered her body and left the remains in a dumpster behind an apartment complex. Assistant State's Attorney Elizabeth Stock prosecuted that case. Anytime we experience increases in homicide like the increase we're currently undergoing, the public should ask questions about what their city institutions are doing to tackle the problem. And to be honest, the citizens of this city deserve to ask those questions and demand transparency and accountability. There's been a lot of misinformation spread by certain politicians and certain sections of the media that intentionally attempt to drive a negative narrative about the crime in our city, about city leadership overall, and about the effectiveness of my office. But let me be very clear. Today, I'm releasing a cumulative annual report that shows that despite all of the challenges that the city has faced in the past 7 years, my office has achieved milestones that I am tremendously proud of and credit to my talented team of prosecutors and support staff. What you will see with the release of this report is over the course of my term, my office has maintained a 90% conviction rate on average for violent offenses, an average of 88% conviction rate for mandatory minimum eligible cases, and a 92% conviction rate for violent repeat offenders, all of which are consistent with the conviction rates of my predecessors over the past 10 years. What you will find in this report is that even despite recent crime rate increases, our commitment to justice has been and continues to be unwavering, which is why my office has exonerated 12 wrongly convicted and imprisoned men who collectively served 300 years for offenses and crimes they never committed. We've recommended the release and modified the excessive sentences imposed upon almost 30 individuals through our sentencing review unit for those who have used their time incarcerated to turn their life around and deserved a second chance. To date, none of those people released have reoffended. My office has led the way on police accountability, including our 2016 white paper titled Investigating and Prosecuting Police Misconduct, Reform Proposals. This was the start of a subsequent years of advocacy that would help support the sweeping police reform bills that passed last year in Annapolis. Whether it's body-worn cameras or requiring officers to intervene when a fellow officer crosses the line, we have made progress because of the courage to challenge the status quo in the city of Baltimore. Since the Freddie Gray trial, my office has convicted 30 police officers in an effort to restore trust among community and police and law enforcement. In the height of the pandemic, we eliminated 1,415 warrants, eliminated approximately 800 outstanding warrants for nonviolent, low-level offenses that we declined to continue prosecuting because they do not impact public safety and irreparably damage community and police relations, and all too often lead to a death sentence for people of color in this city and in this country. Johns Hopkins supported our policies, and that has been well documented. We prioritized our victims and witnesses throughout the past 7 years. In fact, our Victim Witness Services Unit has served 52,972 victims and witnesses of crime, offered 7,745 grief counseling sessions through our Family Bereavement Center, which is the only family bereavement center in the entire state of Maryland, out of a state's attorney's office. We've relocated 1,048 families and secured $3.2 additional in grant funding for victims and witnesses. Finally, we've supported young people like no other administration before by reaching more than 580 elementary school youth through our Great Expectations program, 300 junior state's attorneys through our paid summer program with Youth Works. These young people, 95% of those junior state's attorneys, having graduated from high school or are in a career track or in college, 33% of them are actually in a criminal justice field. Given the wealth of information that is presented, and you will shortly see it, in this nearly 50-page term report, it only makes sense to accompany its release with that of our new, and you'll hear from Darren shortly, interactive data dashboard, so that the public can see the work of our office in real time. This newly developed data dashboard allows viewers to take an in-depth analysis of Baltimore's criminal justice outcomes in the courtroom in an easy-to-read format that updates individuals in real time. Darren will talk to you all more about this in a moment. The information in the data dashboard and in the term report is irrefutable evidence that my office takes violent crime seriously. What is clear from both this cumulative report and the data dashboard is that transparency is paramount, which is why I'm excited to turn things over to Darren to discuss the ins and outs of our new interactive data dashboard. So please check out the cumulative term report on stattorney.org, as well as the data dashboard, which will also be on the website. They have an amazing amount of information. So take it away, Darren.
Good afternoon. Give me a moment. I have to get this back up here.
Yeah.
Where do you want me here? No, that's all right. Let's move this over here. Second. Okay, that should do it. One second. Okay. Well, good afternoon again. How are you doing? Darren O'Brien, Assistant State's Attorney, Director of Information Technology. So, what you're about to see, and I'll take you through a couple examples, but there are three critical points that everyone should know about this information. And one of them, most critical, is this information the information you're seeing and we're compiling for the public to understand a little better is housed and held by the courts. So this information is available to the public. Police department has it, other agencies have this information. We've just taken the data from AOC, Administrative Office of the Courts, and their system, Judicial Information Systems, and are presenting it in an accurate way for the public. There is, so number one, just you really need to take that in. This is not information that this office is accumulating. We probably add about 80% to the data. 20%, I'm sorry. 80% of this data is coming directly from the courts. You can access it. Any agency can go out and get this data and look at the data the same way we do. We're just presenting it easily, right, in a way that you can use it. Number two, in Baltimore City, there's no unified court system. There's no unified agency, there's no unified system for the police to go to, for the public defender to go to, for the state's attorney to go to. This was an effort by our office, under the directive of the state's attorney, to make this publicly available. So you would like to know, probably, in about 2 years, the court systems are working on a system that everyone will have access to in a way that's ingestible, right? Right now, the court system data is very complicated. It's convoluted, and you have to work with it. In about 2 years, good for everyone, including our office and the police department and everyone else, you'll be able to ingest it a little easier, other agencies. And I would say the third thing, most important, is this is version 1, okay? This is version 1, and I know from the state's attorney that in a month or in a couple days, she's gonna think of another number that she wants represented for the public. And when we can figure that out, we'll do it, okay? So those are the parameters. This is data anyone can access, okay? All right, so on to the demo. One thing that you should be looking at right now that should just grab you immediately is the yellow, and it's in yellow for a purpose. And that is, I'm not sure if you can see it, but this is firearm charges, right? So immediately, by looking at the first part of this, arrest data, you can see over the years, if you go to 2019 and you cursor over this, everything in this dashboard, you have to take your time and put the cursor over any number. It's going to give you a blow up and explain it in some detail so that you get a better understanding of what that data is, right? So if you look just very quickly, you'll see, obviously, in 2019, there were 3,770 cases that had firearms charges in them. And if you just cursor up through the years, 2020, you can see the increase, 4,679. 2021, 5,085. And, you know, in 2022, we just started. There's not a lot you can look at, but you can tell that those gun charges constitute 77% of those indictments filed already, of those arrests, I'm sorry, right? Obviously, this was not available before, and you can see just in one screen, upper left-hand corner, the information that's available to you. And I'd just draw you down to the right-hand corner here. This is our information that we pull from central booking, central intake facility, right? You'll see an interesting key mark is that home detentions. So you'll notice in 2019, before we were collecting this data, there is none, right? 2021 or 2020, 579 got home detention. And we increased that by 400% in the following year in 2021. We go to 1,927. Information that you would not have any idea on how to get is being produced for you publicly. Right. So then we'll jump, listen, if you all have 4 days, we can all just stay here and I'll camp through it with you. But so I'm gonna run through it and understand the other thing, you're gonna see COVID-19 everywhere. So we did that intentionally because if you start to see the bar graphs, you know, what's going on, what's wrong with the office. It has nothing to do with the office, the police department. It had a lot to do with COVID. And the numbers just dropped dramatically, you know, unexplainably, except for the pandemic, right? So we're gonna jump over to indictments, and you can see the same trend in indictments, right? So 2021, the number is very low. 2019, it increases. It's a cursor. Upper left-hand corner for you, the top 5 counts. of interest, I would hope, you get a general idea of what the cosmetics are of these cases in bulk. Far right-hand side, or that's far left-hand side for you, sorry. Any of these numbers can be changed at any time. It automatically is reflected. So I'm just gonna, as an example in indictments, I'm gonna unselect them all and give you 2019, and you'll see all the numbers change for the year. So it's very simple to navigate. We'll head over to convictions. We'll do convictions by unit very quickly. These are all our felony units. And if you go down to the bottom of those graphs and bars, it'll tell you independently per year or over a period of years, right? It'll tell you total guilties, total not guilties, and total dismissed in any of the felony units in any year. And if you're really into the demographics, use the demographics key as well. If you want to single out Asian or white or black, you can do that with the same demographics in the convictions, right? We'll go to 10-year spread. So the one thing you have to understand about the magnitude of this data is you really can't put 20 years of data, drill down data, in a dashboard. You sort of have to select the years. So we went back to 2019 to the current date. It seems kind of, unfortunate that we were in the middle of COVID and you're going to see all those dramatic drops, but that's a true reflection, right? So we put 2019 in there to try and give you a standard year of what you would anticipate the office would process. And, so here's important, this is important. The reason we only do those 5 years again is the data, the amount of data. So we've put a 10-year stretch here for you. And this is sort of to give you an example of before Marilyn's administration, you have 5 years prior to that, and then her entire administration. And you can see very clearly and in big numbers, right? Violent repeat offenders, violent crimes, gun cases, and homicide cases. You can see the trend stays fairly even. The thing that changes that are going to be the dispositions, right? So victim witness issues, officer issues, those type of things. And we end with the data dictionary, because there's a lot in here, right? There's a lot of abbreviations on every single page. There's an abbreviation, VRO, DV, domestic violence, those sort of things. So we've put this index in here, dictionary, and notes. Pay particular attention to the special notes, right? Because it'll explain some of the mathematics or equations behind the numbers. So it's pretty clearly there. And I guess I would end with that unless there's a request. But please, this is version 1, and I'm sure Marilyn's going to come up with version 2 before you do, but I think we're looking for that feedback from the public so we can present it to you, right? I think that's it. Thank
Any
you.
questions?
You mentioned your policies that you've put in place now prosecuting low-level crimes. We've spoken to several of the candidates who are running for the state's attorney. So I ask you, are those policies that you'll keep in place if you are in fact going to run, and what do you say to those who question or worry that those policies aren't working, as even you've acknowledged homicides and non-fatal shootings are spiking in the city?
So what I will say is that Johns Hopkins came out with a report more recently where they have actually followed our policies, and what they have concluded is that the policies in which the target population that we were focusing on, there was a less than 1% recidivism rate. So anybody that draws a false correlation with urinating in public with the trigger pullers and homicides, it's illogical, right? Not only did Johns Hopkins do this independent report, but they also said that because of our policies, we averted the arrest of individuals, which would have been 80% black people in this country. And so anybody, I don't care who they are, that thinks that there's a correlation between my minor offense policies and violence in the city is not being, it's just not credible.
And I know you're prosecuting drug distribution, not possession, but a lot of people, we've heard a lot of complaints from people who say they're seeing more of that in their neighborhoods and it's hurting their quality of life. You've spoken about this before. What do you say to those people?
So what I will say is we've been very clear, not only myself, but also the commissioner, that we are prosecuting drug dealers, okay? And I've gone and I've done town halls in every police district, both virtually and in person. We've done the rounds for the the police training and the roll calls. We've done training sessions, and so we'll continue to do that. I think it was definitely, we got a little bit of pushback from certain, not the command staff at Baltimore Police Department, but some officers who were resistant to the policy changes. I think that that's changing, and this is why this is so important, because you can look at the indictments, and what you'll see from the indictments last year is that we indicted a lot of drug dealers. We will continue to do our job. We will continue to work collaboratively with the police department to ensure that we're getting drug dealers off our streets, because we know that undercurrent is the undercurrent of violence, right? And so anybody who thinks that we're not, please rest assured we are continuing to do our job and to arrest drug dealers and to prosecute them.
As far as go ahead, Barry.
Just wondering about issuing the term report and also bringing up the dashboard. Was this done because of criticism of your office and the way that it was being handled?
So no, not actually. Darren has been working on this data dashboard for a while.
Yep.
So how long? So you can tell him how long.
About a half a year to a year. I mean, you have to understand again.
Come closer. You can
Yep.
come closer.
This data is available through the courts. It's just that it is not an easy thing. In 2 years, it'll be easy for you to get this data and demonstrate it or present it. It just, ask other agencies that are trying to do this with AOC data and ask them how long it takes and the difficulty it takes. In fact, I'm not sure of many jurisdictions that are doing it.
And so let me just also be very clear. I had the awesome opportunity to go to Chicago and see how they have their own data dashboard, right? And that was something that we wanted to replicate in an attempt to be transparent for the citizens of Baltimore City. So this has always been in the works. I think that we've always published a number of the data that you see in the centralized location on our website. We've been doing that since 2016. So this is nothing new. I can tell you our annual report we put out every single year. And what was it, 2018? We did a full term report that went over, 2015, 16, 17, and 18. And so this is consistent with what we've always done, which is to now reflect upon all that we've been able to accomplish despite all of the external challenges and obstacles that our city has faced. If you really think about it, from the uprising and the untimely death of Freddie Gray to, the full implementation of body-worn cameras on all police officers to, having to deal with the federal consent decree to having to play cleanup for one of the largest police corruption scandals in the history of this country, then to have to go into a global pandemic. I'm extremely proud of my prosecutors and the work that we've been able to accomplish despite all of those external challenges.
Ms. Mosby, can the public trust you right now in this position while you continue to face the indictment and you're accused of breaking the law yourself?
Well, what I can say is that I'm going to stay focused, and I'm going to do my job. I'm going to do what the citizens of Baltimore voted me to do, and this is indicative of that. Next question.
Can we expect you to run for re-election? There's a week left to file.
Right now, I'm focused on the job at hand. We have a lot to do. We're coming out of a global pandemic. The courts have been essentially closed for 2 years. We just got back into the court physically. And so, I got to make sure the morale of my office is good and we're staying focused.
If you are convicted, will you step down as state's attorney?
Like I said, I'm staying focused on the job at hand. Next question.
Darren mentioned the null process and the stats,
Mhm.
and we did a preliminary look at those numbers, and it seems like about half are because of witnesses didn't show or insufficient evidence.
Mhm.
What's the answer to fixing that? I mean, is that a police issue? Is that a prosecutor issue? Is that a whole big picture?
That's a big picture cultural issue. I think this is one of the reasons why we've been focusing on this, witness relocation, victim witness services for the past 7 years. We've had a campaign in the midst of the global pandemic, You're Not Alone, Together We're Stronger. We've been really focusing 33%, and this is nothing new. This information has been consistent. Throughout my tenure, about 33% of the cases that we have to get rid of is due to a lack of victim witness cooperation or victims and witnesses failing to appear. And so we try to ensure that people know about the services that we have to offer, one of which is the Bereavement Center. We offer lifetime grief counseling to families and next of kin whenever they want to come in. There's no time period. And so, we we struggle, but we're committed to working with the mayor and with the commissioner to change the culture of the stop snitching mentality. You know, when you have seniors and babies that are being shot in broad daylight, and 14-year-olds being shot in broad daylight, and people aren't coming forward, it's really hard to get those individuals off the street. You can't blame the police if nobody's coming forward. You can't blame my office because there's no perpetrator that has been identified yet. Now, when we get them, what this data shows is we're more likely to convict them. But we have to change the culture in our city, and that's something that we're committed to doing as an office.
But it sounds like even with your last statement that you are still possibly looking forward even to another term. Are you not looking forward to another term?
So what I'm saying is right now I am focused on the job and the task at hand. I have a lot on my plate, but I have a committed, talented group of executive team members and assistant state's attorneys that are committed and coming in here every single day with voluminous case dockets and uncooperative witnesses and doing their job. And so what I'm focused on at this moment and the task at hand is being the state's attorney for Baltimore City throughout this tenure.
Your campaign website is back up after your social media accounts went dark. Your campaign website is back saying something is coming. Should we expect an announcement in the next 7 days?
I don't know. I guess you would have to see.
I think you know.
Well, I said I can't. I think you're gonna have to see. Yes.
You mentioned how committed you are right now to being state's attorney.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I wonder if you have any concerns that all the attention that your federal case is getting is serving as a distraction for anybody else in the office, prosecutors who, like you said, are dealing with such intense caseloads.
So what I will say is that the people in this office, I started in this office as a law clerk. There is no one more talented, more committed to the work and dedicated to the citizens of Baltimore City than the state's attorneys and prosecutors in my office. This is the reason why, everywhere else in the state, they come and they solicit the most talented prosecutors from our office. This is why the Attorney General solicits from our office. The Mayor's office solicits from our office. And so the people in this office are committed to the work. They are not going to be distracted. And I can tell you that you can see that as it's reflected from the convictions that I talked about just this week.
So we're going to do one more question. These two ladies have asked a lot of questions. Who has one more question? Okay.
I mean, what do you think is the biggest? What takeaway would you highlight from this data that you're presenting, in such a clear way here?
So I think this is centralized for you, right? So now you're not being fed misinformation, and the public can go here and see the interactive data for themselves. Of course, it goes down. But they can go and they can see the arrests, they can see the indictments, they can see the convictions, they can see the cases that have been dismissed, they can see the rationale for these cases being dismissed. And so in real time, you can follow this information and be informed. We don't want our public to be misinformed. And we want, from even a journalistic integrity perspective, we want you all to be able to see the information. We're not trying to hide the ball. And transparency is the key to breaking down those barriers of distrust when it comes to community and law enforcement. And so that's what our attempt is in establishing and launching this.
But is there a particular data point that you think is particularly worth noting? One of the statistics, is there anything that you're particularly proud of?
I mean, I think despite all of those challenges that I mentioned and referenced earlier, I think that understanding and recognizing that we're still on par with a steady conviction rate, I think that that's really important because of the misinformation that's been put out there. And I live in West Baltimore. I don't have to turn on the news and open up the newspaper to see the violence plaguing my community. All I have to do is open up my door. And so it's important for people to be informed. And that was the importance of launching this data dashboard. And this was the importance of ensuring that we distributed the cumulative annual report. Thank you, guys. Oh, can't go that way.